You know, I never think of philosophy in films. No, never ever. It's just that when the door is open for the viewer, with time, letting things happen and not just informing the viewer with, codes and representation, but when you open the door to the viewer with this amazing device, which is a technical invention that can apprehend reality, presence, and time, which is the sound device and the camera, then something technically philosophical comes into the camera. It's like the camera and the sound device have the capacity of incarnating philosophy. Because when we make a film, we are basically reflecting on who we are and what are we doing here. That's why we make it. That's why dogs don't want to make films, even if they could. Because they don't need to think about themselves. But then, this is pretty obvious maybe for all arts or for all reflections of ourselves. But the incredible thing is that whatever we choose to shoot and the way we put it together shows not by will, as in philosophy. When philosophers, it is their will that wants to construct and that is needed to construct. But with the camera and the sound device, it is not a matter of will. It will just show without our will what we think about and what we feel and what we consider, just by the way we use the machine. So the way we put things together will show our philosophy of life, because a film is capturing life, existence, the place where we live, the place where we think. And it is by definition philosophical. When it is not a narrative code, when it is not drama, film is by definition, it incorporates philosophy. But it goes beyond philosophy, because it will be the best philosophy, ideally, the one Heidegger wanted, the philosophy that is not trying to categorize or to explain, but just
itself also.
What's that?
It lives itself.
Exactly. It lives space for the being, and with the sound that proves that time is going by, and with just passive, active at a certain point preparation, and then passive capture, the film will be a true way to be close to the self, to what Heidegger called the self. I'm talking about Heidegger because you mentioned philosophy, but Heidegger, I think, is the one who has understood this in words, at least, maybe not with his life, but that we have not to forget being, the capacity of being. And this is what this amazing device does, and the sound too. We can just capture being, so we are close to being. And this is the most beautiful capacity of cinema. And this is actually the center of the mystery of cinema, which is overlooked mostly and we don't care about. But this is the great capacity of cinema. This is why if Martians come one day or aliens, I'm sure they will pay a lot of attention to our films, because they show a lot of the way we think and the way we feel existence. It is the same, I think. But in cinema, it can be felt and considered as something external, and nothing will get on its way. And in time, in true existence, in life, there's a lot of interferences with it. So we relate to it in a different way, because we cannot see a synthesis of it. But when we see a film, this is the only art when we truly connect existential time with a concept of time. When we're living life, time is not a concept. Time is just a condition. But when we are watching a film, then time is a concept, and we can think about it as a presence, as I said in the talk now today. As I mentioned, there can be the presence of humans, the presence of objects, the presence of ideas, and mostly the presence of time in a film. And you can feel this. So time is the condition for emotion. This is how I would describe it. If there was no time in film, then there would only be aesthetical emotion. But the emotion of the construction of philosophy is only possible due to time in film. So this is the central aspect of film, for sure. And this is why sound is somehow the condition or the proof of time in a film when there is no movement. So sound, image, and movement are what cinema. This is what cinema is, and there all the philosophy we talked about, it is there that it can incarnate. And for them, only city people think that country people think a lot of time and presence, and but most of the people in the countryside are very stressed too, and feel very similarly life, almost always with an absence of consciousness for time in the present and life going through. I can tell you, I always tell my wife that in the place where we live, I've never seen more neurotical people per capita than where we live. And maybe it's an exaggeration, but I can assure you this is also something very personal, It doesn't have to do with external conditions. There's people in cities that are very connected to each other and to actual existence, and same thing and I think the percentage is very similar in the countryside. These are human characteristics that are very internal and very little connected to the external world, I think. When you go to the countryside, it's not like you relax and you start connecting with the earth or anything like that, just by pure mechanics, of being there. This I have really tested it. It is something much more inner that has to do with the way you perceive life individually. I don't know why this happens, but it's like a human capacity that it's not connected with a city or the countryside. If I would make films in the cities, they would be very similar, I think. I understand what you're saying, but I would be very happy to do a film that would open in a water park, and the way they would turn on the lights at dawn, and people would start the machines, and then there was probably a scuba diver that would go into the aquarium, and he would get dressed, and then someone else would help him, and this would be for me as exciting as sunsets. It is very similar. All this is just energy. It doesn't matter. In some films by Kaurismäki, one of them it starts with a factory closing down. I think it's the first one, Crime and Punishment, and they're closing down this meat factory, and it is so beautiful. For me, this is as beautiful or more than sunset or sunrise. How did I shoot it? It's a long story, but basically it was just a long traveling shot on a dolly, and we pushed forward the dolly and then back and then stopped for 5 minutes and then again until an hour had elapsed. And then we're just cross-fading those moments when the chariot goes back and forth. We cross-fade, and then you have the whole 40 meters in an hour. Well, first I would definitely say that the speed of shooting and the speed of editing really has nothing to do with the nature of cinema. It is not the speed itself. It is the fact that there is something authentic to see in an image, and that the conditions are right for you as a viewer to be able to see. Usually this requires time, but it is not only time that will give you access to that. And it is not by the fact that you make something slow that you will have access to anything special. Time is just maybe it's a condition, but it is not the actual genesis. You see, it's not because there's time that you will see something special. So if you would ask me what would I call it, I would again say cinema of presence, not cinema of representation, cinema of presence. And of course, presence,
I like that too.
to be understood or to be accessed needs a little time, at least. Maybe a long time, but a little time at least. So not slow cinema. I don't want ever to be slow. I want just to give enough time for the things to be seen. If there's not much to be seen, then you might as well go fast. There's no purpose in going slowly if there's nothing to be seen. It is more, time is just serving. Should just be serving. It's just an offer to you, as I said before. It's an open door. It's a door that opens for you to be able to see something. But what matters is what is there to see. So time would just be the condition of seeing that. So yes, I would say, to answer your question, cinema of presence, not cinema of representation. I wouldn't say contemplative cinema or slow cinema or anything. I think contemplation is only something connected to the senses, you know. And I think we have to go beyond contemplation. We have to, the cinema I like most creates something through this open door for the viewer. There's something to see, there's time to see it, but there's something beyond, which is the whole narrative, not narrative, emotional space that the film is creating. Mm-hmm. This is for me the most interesting thing, that there's a whole construction. And then the authenticity and the capacity to be there with time are conditions for this only. But it's not because I lived in Europe, because Mexico is also a Western country mostly. I mean, half and half, let's say. So I'm very close to that spiritual crisis over there too. Although thanks to the indigenous view, this is reduced, this spiritual crisis. You know, I think all this comes from a very, very deep paradigm, which is very old and not so much discussed, which is the paradigm of separativeness, if you can say that. This is a word I invented, but or separativity. You know, the fact that we are, and this is not cultural, this is more cosmogonical. The fact that we, or the Westerners, consider themselves so separate from the rest of the world creates a lot of insecurity and fear and anxiety, you know. And that's why Westerners have invented colonialism and, you know, so much war and even the destruction of the planet, you know. Because we don't understand, it's hard to understand that we are just part of the world, not a central godlike creature, you know. This is the terrible thing of also the monotheist religions, you know, that they made us think that we are created in the image of God and all this, you know, which is like the most absurd idea that anyone could come up with. If we were really, then we wouldn't be creating all these disasters we create, you know, how could we? So this paradigm has had an amazing positive phase, which is all the creativity and the critical view of existence, which is so important. But if we forget about being, about the self, we forget it, then we are in trouble. We should be able to not disassociate so fully from the world, I think. And in Mexico, for example, when I sit with indigenous mind, I see that this indigenous mind is so much closer to just being. And usually these people are happier than Mexican Westerners or Europeans, for sure. But of course, I don't, I really want to also put forward the importance of the separated mind, because it has created incredible things too. You know, now I really, always my favorite film is the last one I made.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because it's the one closest to me, you know. The other ones I tend to forget. But I think Battle in Heaven was very ambitious, you know, and very rebellious. You have to go beyond that, you know. It is very rebellious, and I think rebellion is a very, very beautiful capacity of humans that we should never leave behind. Political dimension of rebellion for me is secondary. For me, the best, the most deep and interesting dimension of rebellion is philosophical rebellion. And this is what matters, you know, because if it's philosophical, then it's sociological, it's political, it is theological also, you know. We have to rebel, because this is what shows that we're human, that we're not sheep. We must rebel. And a lot of the people that rebel politically are acting like sheep, actually. So I believe very strongly that the full rebellion, as powerful as possible, not only politically.